Hi guys, welcome back to Mower Fitness. Today's video is about my journey of training for a half Ironman as a much larger guy. As of today, the day before my event, I'm sitting at a hefty 103 kilograms. And with a height of 185 centimeters, technically that gives me a BMI of 30.1, which is technically classed as obese. Now you might be thinking, how the flip does this guy expect to finish one of the hardest possible sporting events while being that heavy? Well, let me explain. So despite my weight, I've actually been doing endurance sports for about 3 to 4 years now, mostly running and cycling. Let me give you a quick rundown. Back before the pandemic, I was about 120 kilograms, but the lockdown in the UK gave me a lot of free time to try and sort myself out. I started dieting and running, and within half a year, I was down to 100 kilograms. In the following years, I started getting more into cycling, and that became my main sport. I've done my fair share of big rides, and I even took part in a casual race. Up till now, I've managed to maintain my weight between 95 and 105 kilograms, which is by no means slim, but is still a lot better than 120 kilograms. So how did I end up getting myself into a half Ironman? The reason for this actually goes way back. I've always had doing a full Ironman as one of my goals, and that's actually the reason why I started this channel. It all began as a sort of way to keep myself accountable, as I figured if I have an audience, no matter the size, I would have to keep myself focused on my goals.
So the reasons that I'm going to make videos about it is mainly to keep myself accountable.
And although the Ironman dream never really materialised, I have definitely got a lot fitter since starting the channel. Anyway, I spent the last few years living in China and only moved back to the UK at the beginning of 2024. For those of you who have ever moved countries, you know it's a long, stressful, tedious process. During that move, I ended up not training for quite a long time, and my weight ballooned to the highest it has been in a few years, and generally my fitness was just not very good at all. By the time the move was finished and everything was back to normal, it was late February, and I knew I needed an event to focus on to help me get back into shape, so I signed up for a half Ironman. This was scheduled for the end of March, giving me approximately 1 month to get myself back into a decent shape. I had done a few half marathons before, so I kind of knew what to expect. With this in mind, I set myself a goal of running this half marathon in 2 hours. I knew it'd be a pretty challenging goal considering my current fitness levels, but hopefully it's something I could achieve. So I spent the month leading up to the event doing quite a bit of training, mostly a lot of easy runs mixed in with a few faster sessions. I didn't follow a proper training plan as such, I just sort of did what I felt like, definitely not the optimal way of doing it. In the end, I managed to finish the half marathon with a time of 1 hour, 59 minutes and 39 seconds, crossing the line 21 seconds quicker than my goal. Right, so that's where I stood at the end of March, able to finish a half marathon in a pretty average time of 2 hours. After that, my training was a bit aimless. I didn't have any events lined up in the calendar, so I didn't really have anything to train for. So I just spent the following weeks just riding and running for fun. That is until I received a very timely email, an email which ended up changing everything. This email was from Coach Kosta from the NRC training team. Basically, he reached out and said, I've been watching your videos and I would like to help you train. So of course I said yes. We chatted for a while about what my goals were, and I told him I wanted to get into triathlon. We both agreed that doing a half Ironman would be a pretty challenging but achievable goal. So I looked online for an event and I found one that fit the bill perfectly. August 4th, the Big East Middle Distance Triathlon. I now had an event in the calendar chalked in for 3 months in the future. Time to find out if someone with zero triathlon experience can go from complete beginner to half Ironman finisher in just 3 months. So the main struggle in training for triathlon is that it is 3 completely different sports. In all my previous sporting endeavours, I've only ever been self-coached. And when you're training for just one thing, I think you can mostly get away with that. But triathlon is a lot more complex. This is where Coach Kosta and his experience comes in. He built me a personalised training plan, which is tailored just for me. The limitations of using a generic plan, which you can find online, are that it is made for everyone and anyone, whereas working with a real coach means the plan can be adjusted and tailored on the fly to suit my own specific strengths and weaknesses. This, in theory, should allow me to improve much quicker than just following a generic plan. Let me quickly give a quick rundown on what a half Ironman actually is. I've been going on about it as if it's general knowledge, but it probably isn't, as it's quite a niche sport. A half Ironman is basically a long distance triathlon. It's a race where you start off by swimming 1.9 kilometers, you then transition onto a 90 kilometer bike ride and finish with a 21.2 kilometer run. All in all, it's pretty brutal, and even finishing is considered successful for most people. To do well in an event like this, you need to be able to swim, bike and run to a solid level. Personally, I feel like my cycling and my running are both okay. Not great, just okay. But my swimming is definitely levels below that, and it's definitely the point where I'm going to struggle with the most. Like most kids in the UK, I learned to swim at school, but since then I haven't swam at all, except at the beach. So I have 3 months to get myself from a pretty poor swimming standard to someone who can swim 1.9 kilometers in open water. A pretty big ask. The main problem here is the open water part. In a pool, if you're getting tired, you can just stop and stand up or hang on the side, for example. But in the open water, it's completely different. You're really on your own and you need to have the endurance to swim the whole distance without stopping. But in most events, there will be some guys in kayaks ready to help you if you really end up struggling. So don't be too scared to join a triathlon if you're not the greatest swimmer, because there's always someone there to help you. Given that Coach Kosta and I did our communication mostly online, given he's in Germany and I'm in the UK, it's quite difficult for him to help me directly with my swimming. So for that reason, I joined my local triathlon club. Every week they ran 2 swimming sessions, which were coached by proper swim teachers. Having this really helped me gain confidence in the water. When I first started, I was struggling to swim 2 lengths without getting out of breath, but within a few weeks, I was definitely far more comfortable. If anyone else is scared about doing a triathlon because of the swimming, then I would definitely recommend searching for a local club. Everyone at mine were really friendly and are all there to help you. My cycling and running training went a lot smoother. I simply followed the plan that Coach Kosta set. Most of the workouts were low intensity endurance work. The aim of this was to get my body used to those long sessions, which given that a half Ironman will probably take longer than 6 hours, it definitely makes sense. There were a few high intensity sessions, which were mostly Zwift races.
Come on!
But these definitely took a back seat to the pure endurance work. In this video, I'm not going to go really deep into the specifics of the training plan because it's probably quite boring for most people. But if that's something you'd like to hear more about, then leave me a comment down below and I'll consider making a separate video about that. However, in total, since I started training with Coach Kosta on the 21st of April, I have done 64 hours of cycling, 41 hours of running, and 18 hours of swimming, with a total distance covered of 2,072 kilometers. Hopefully all those hours of hard training will pay off. Like I said, a half Ironman is a pretty big event, so jumping straight into it would be madness. So I decided to sign up for 2 shorter events to use as practice. The first was a sprint triathlon. This was 6 weeks before the half Ironman and consisted of a 400-meter pool swim, a 20-kilometer bike ride, and then a 5-kilometer run. This was my first ever triathlon, and all in all it went quite well. It took me 1 hour and 25 minutes. Overall, this event wasn't too challenging for me, but it was definitely useful to learn some of the more specific details which I'd need for my long triathlon. The second event I signed up for was an Olympic distance triathlon. This was about double the distance of the sprint triathlon and half the distance of the half Ironman. The main challenge for this event was the swim. Instead of a 400-meter pool swim, there was a 1,500-meter open water swim. This is definitely what I was most scared about. However, on race day, everything went smoothly. The cold water was a shock, but I managed to keep myself composed and finish strong. Overall, I did the Olympic distance triathlon in 3 hours and 30 seconds. This was definitely a step up, and in the final few kilometers of the run, I was really struggling. This event really opened my eyes to how difficult this half Ironman would be. If I was struggling after 3 hours, how am I going to be feeling after 6? The bike section of a half Ironman is 90 kilometers long, which should take me around 3 hours. So I needed to make a few modifications to make my bike more suitable. Now, a lot of triathletes would have a fancy £5,000 tri-bike, but I'm not going to spend that much money because I'm just starting out, so my trusty road bike will have to do. I've added 2 more bottle cages behind my seat, which brings my total bottle count to 4. This should be enough unless the weather is super hot. I've also added clip-on aero bars. These allow me to get lower and have a far more aerodynamic position, using less energy to go faster. I've also added a top tube bag, which in an event of this length is definitely very important. Overall, these upgrades cost me less than £100, so far better value than buying a triathlon bike. They say eating is the secret 4th discipline of long distance triathlon. For that reason, I need to make sure my nutrition plan is on point. On the bike, I have 4 bottles all filled with 80 grams of carb drink. I also have some gels in my top tube bag if I can't consume all my calories via liquid. I'm aiming to overfuel on the bike because it's supposed to be easier to take in calories while you're cycling as opposed to when you're running. For the run, I'm going to have my water backpack. The weather forecast says it's going to be quite hot, so I'd rather have the water available to me at any time rather than relying on the water on the course. Having the backpack also makes it a lot easier for me to carry my gels. Also, it gives me a convenient point to attach my GoPro. For the 1500 meter swim, I'm aiming for a time of 40 minutes. This is the same distance as in the Olympic distance triathlon, so 40 minutes should be achievable. However, it is worth noting that this swim is in a river instead of in a lake, so there might be a slight current which might affect my time. For the bike portion, I'm going to aim for a time of 3 hours. The route is a lot flatter than all my previous triathlons, so I feel like aiming for a similar speed, even though it's a bit longer, should be achievable. Overall, I'll be very happy with an average speed of 30 kilometers an hour. For the run, it's double the distance of the Olympic distance triathlon, and I finished that in 52 minutes. So logically, I should be aiming at a time of around 1 hour and 44 minutes, right? Well, not really, because in the Olympic distance triathlon, the run started after only 2 hours. In the half Ironman, the run will start after around 4 hours, so I would already have legs which are so much more fatigued before even starting the run. Aiming for the same pace is not realistic at all. I feel like on the run it's quite likely that I'll hit the wall at some point and I'm just going to have no energy whatsoever. With that in mind, I think I would be quite happy with a time of around 2 hours. That will be a pace of 6 minutes per kilometer. That's a pace I feel like I can run at even if I'm pretty fatigued. If it goes quite well, I might be closer to 1 hour 50, but I don't feel like that will be the case. I feel like at some point I'm going to hit the wall and I'm just going to be absolutely done. The final 10 kilometers or so are definitely going to be a real struggle and I'm going to be digging deep just to finish. With all that being said, I will definitely be very, very happy with a time of 6 hours. I feel like that is a pretty solid attempt for someone of my size and build, but I also know that I'll be pushing myself to the limits. This is an event which is far longer than anything I've ever done before, so at some point something will go wrong and I will just feel like giving up. To be honest, I'll be pretty happy as long as I finish. I feel like in events that are this long, there's definitely always a chance of not finishing, so even if I do finish, I'll be very happy. Right, that's pretty much it. Just a case of getting all my stuff ready and sorted before race day. Wish me luck.
Morning everyone, so it is now race day and I just got up and to be honest I didn't even sleep that well, so I'm not even feeling that great this morning. Maybe the nerves are finally getting to me. I've got my breakfast here, it's just oats, coffee and some fruit, so pretty basic stuff.
I arrived at the venue about an hour before the race started. The race was a deep water start, which is where you go into the water about 5 minutes before the race actually starts. To be honest, the water was not deep at all. I was about waist height at the start line and the riverbed was really gunky and muddy and I was like almost knee deep in really thick, disgusting mud. It wasn't that nice at all. The race started and I already knew that the swim was not my strong point, so all I wanted to do here was get through it without burning any matches. This was my first time swimming in salt water and it actually makes a huge difference compared to swimming in fresh water. Whenever the salt water gets in your mouth, it is really disgusting and it sort of makes your mouth feel really dry and numb, and I swear it makes you feel a lot thirstier than you really are. The route was 2 big laps of 750 meters. There was definitely a current. When you were swimming out, the current was against you and it took ages to get to the turning around point, but then on the way back you felt like you were flying. There were quite a lot of people at the start and I definitely bumped into lots and lots of people, but I guess that's just part of these big races. Overall, I feel like the swim went quite well. My sighting wasn't particularly good. There were definitely some points where I was sort of swimming off at a random angle. In the end, that made a difference to the total distance I swam. The official distance was 1500 meters, but I ended up swimming 1600, so an extra 100 meters. The time was just under 40 minutes with a pace of 2 minutes and 30 per 100. Overall, I was pretty happy with this. However, my heart rate was pretty high during the swim. It averaged 163. In the pool, if I'm swimming at this pace, it's normally quite a bit lower. So probably the cold water and the fact that I was a bit nervous made my heart rate go up a bit higher. So that was the first bit done. I came out to swim into T1 feeling pretty good. T1 was actually quite long. From the point where you got out the water, you had to run about 200 meters before getting to the actual transition zone. I managed to get my arms out of my swimsuit when I was running. I was not particularly graceful about this, but it probably saved me like 5 seconds. When I got to the transition zone, I really struggled getting my legs out. I said I was going to practice this beforehand, but I never got around to it. So it definitely wasn't the smoothest transition, Putting on my bike shoes and socks took me ages. Overall, T1 was a pretty slow process, taking around 6 minutes. Onto the bike leg. This was quite long, 86 kilometers. The route had around 400 meters of climbing, so overall pretty flat. I felt like the bike leg would definitely be my strongest. Straight onto the course, and the first thing I noticed was my Insta360 camera was not working. So this camera is around 3 years old and it just decided today it wasn't having it. So all this footage you're seeing is from my previous race, but it doesn't really make that much difference because, to be honest, the bike leg was pretty uneventful. The most interesting part was right at the beginning. This is where I, being quite a strong cyclist, can overtake a lot of the faster swimmers. So there were quite a few events going on in parallel. There was a sprint distance triathlon and an Olympic distance triathlon, so there were quite a lot of bikes on the route. For the first 30 or so kilometers, I definitely felt quite strong. I was really thirsty though coming out of the water, and I ended up drinking one of my 4 bottles in the first 10 or so minutes. The second 30k, I started to feel a bit empty. I was continuing to eat and drink, and by this point the amount of bikes on the road was really not many. I only saw about 2 or 3 for the final hour or so. The final 30 kilometers was definitely a real struggle. I felt really empty by this point. I'd given up on my target power goal of 200 watts and was just trying to ride as efficiently as possible, so I was coasting down every little hill and just trying to stay low. Towards the end of the bike leg, the weather started to heat up. Previously it had been quite cloudy, but the sun finally pushed through. I ended up drinking all 4 of my bottles. I spent the first half of the bike route trying to be as low and as aero as possible, but in the end my position on the aero bars became really uncomfortable, and my saddle started to feel painful as well. I was getting some major chafing in those regions, so it wasn't particularly nice come the end. I definitely need to work on getting my fit right, but that's something for later. Finally, the end of the bike leg came. I ended up finishing in a time of 2 hours and 56 minutes with an average speed of 29 kilometers an hour, just under my 3-hour goal, so I was pretty happy with that. I felt like my weight really held me back here. Even though it wasn't particularly hilly, it was just sort of up and down all day, so every time I got up some speed, there was a slight incline and then I just lost it straight away. In the end, my average power was 167 watts or 191 watts normalized. My heart rate on the bike was 151, which is pretty low zone 3 for me, so I definitely wasn't pushing particularly hard. I think it's just the sheer distance of this leg that really took the energy out of me. Into transition 2, this again was not smooth at all. I had watched some of the Olympic triathletes and I saw that they tend to take their feet out of their shoes and then start running like that. So foolishly, I decided I'm going to copy their method, and it was not a good idea. That's because between the dismount line on the bike and where the transition zone actually is, there's this little path and it was full of little stones, and I was just trying to run over that barefoot, and it was not a good idea at all. I should have just stuck to what I always do and just unclipped my feet and run with my shoes on. In the end, transition 2 ended up taking around 4 minutes, so not as slow as transition 1, but still definitely not quick. It took a bit longer because I was carrying my water backpack as well, which was definitely a good choice. I don't think I would have made it through the run without that water, to be honest. Anyway, straight onto the run. As soon as I got off the bike, I knew that this was going to be a long drag to the finish. My legs by this point were already feeling pretty much done. I'd set myself a goal of doing the 20-kilometer run in 2 hours, which would mean I need a pace of 6 minutes per kilometer. By the time I started the run, I was 3 hours and 45 minutes into the race. So I had a buffer of around 15 minutes to reach my 6-hour goal. So hopefully I had enough in the bank. Even if I blew up, I would be able to make 6 hours. For the first kilometer of the run, I averaged 5:41, and that was by far my fastest kilometer before I settled in and realized how bad I felt. My legs were so heavy, and I also felt really bloated because on the bike I drank so much. But the thing is, I was sweating so much that I felt like I needed to drink all that water, so the heat really did a number on me. But despite drinking all that water on the bike, I still felt quite dry-throated and sort of dehydrated on the run, so I don't think I can really consume that much more water. I'm just like way too sweaty, I think. To be honest, I think I started the race a bit dehydrated. I should have like chugged a bottle of water just before the swim, but I didn't. Anyway, for the first 10 kilometers of the race, I averaged a pace of 6 minutes and 20, which is pretty slow, but if I averaged that pace, it would be enough to get me to the end. However, at 10k, I really hit the wall and I had to stop and take some walking breaks. My legs were just done at that point and I was so empty. The weather was getting hotter and hotter the later into the day we got, and I was just really struggling to keep cool. I kept taking water from the aid stations and just pouring it over my head. On the run, my nutrition wasn't that great. I only took 1 gel during the 2-hour run, and I definitely ran out of energy towards the end, but I felt so bloated that I thought I'd be sick if I took any more gels, so I just kept sipping on my water. I managed to pull myself together and get myself through a mixture of shuffling and walking to kilometer 15. At this point, there were only 5 kilometers to go, and I only had 35 minutes to do it. So I had to run the final 5 kilometers at a pace of around 7 minutes per kilometer. So normally for me, that sort of pace would be really, really easy. But after already 5.5 hours of exercise, I really doubted whether I would actually make it under my 6-hour goal. The next half an hour was a real drag, but I got myself into the final kilometer. And then once you can see the finish line, you always have that last little bit of energy, especially because there's a little bit of a crowd there and everyone's cheering you on to get to the finish. So I summoned my last little bits of energy and just sprinted for the finish line.
Absolutely flying to complete his race today. We've got Jarrod Mower.
In the end, I crossed the line in 5 hours and 56 minutes, 4 minutes quicker than my goal time. I was super pleased with this. Even though the run was a proper struggle, I was super buzzed to get under 6 hours. So as of today, it is 3 days after the event when I'm filming this video, and today my legs feel pretty fine. There's still a slight bit of tension in my quads, but that's to be expected. I feel like tomorrow I'll be 100% back to normal. As soon as I crossed the line, I felt pretty rough.
You've just finished.
I'm so done.
How was it?
Painful. It was, I mean, you're exhausted when you start running, so it's just not nice.
Again next year?
Yeah. That's right, you can do it next year as well.
Maybe.
In total, I burned around 5,000 calories. So that night I had a Domino's, which was definitely well earned. The event finished at around 6 p.m. And then by the time I ate and got ready for bed, it was probably like 9 o'clock. And on that night, I really struggled to sleep. My body was just like radiating heat, so I just couldn't get comfortable at all. In the end, I only slept for like 3 hours that night. The next day, my legs felt okay actually. They were obviously quite tight, but they didn't feel super terrible like I expected. The problem I had that day is that I was just really, really sleepy. The second night after I actually slept properly, I feel like my body had finally cooled down and I could actually get to a proper temperature. I slept for 9 hours that night and definitely made up for the lost sleep the night before. However, the second day after is when my legs really started to hurt. It seems there's some sort of delayed reaction when you do these big sort of events. I did a few super easy walks just to keep the blood flowing, and I think that really helped. To be honest, I think I recovered quite quickly. I read online about people who do their first half Ironman and they just feel rubbish for days and even weeks after, but to be honest, I feel like I've recovered quite quickly here. All right, going forward. So I have definitely caught the triathlon bug. All the events I've done so far have been brilliant, but I do feel like my favorite one was the Olympic distance triathlon. I feel like it's long enough to really challenge yourself, but not so long that it's a horrible struggle to even get to the finish line. I feel like the half Ironman event is just a bit too long for me at my current fitness levels. Maybe once I get a bit more training in, I'll be able to enjoy this one more. But for now, the Olympic distance is definitely more fun for me. I feel like I can push myself and actually race until the end. Whereas in the half Ironman distance, it's definitely just a case of getting yourself to the end. Of course, it was my first time doing all distances, so hopefully in the future, my fitness will be better and I'll be able to push myself more. Even though I really struggled towards the end, I feel like I managed my energy quite well. But if I were to nitpick, I probably would have gone a bit easier in the swim and the bike and saved some more energy for my run. My Garmin watch has a feature called Stamina, which tells you how much energy you have left. And when I started the run, I had 42%, but then when I crossed the finish line, I had 1%. So at least I definitely emptied the tank. I'm definitely going to be trying another half Ironman at some point. There's so much time for me to gain. Obviously, the main issue is my weight. If I can get that down to a reasonable number, there is so much free time essentially to be had.
Future Jarrod here, and currently editing the video, and as of today, which is about 2 weeks after the event, I am 100 kilograms, which is about 4 kilograms down from where I started, so the weight loss is already going well.
For the swim, there's also quite a lot of time to be gained. I have pretty poor technique at the moment and swimming is mostly about form. So if I can even make a few slight improvements to my form, I feel like there's definitely a lot of time there as well. I'm going to keep swimming a few times each week because I actually quite enjoy it. I'm also going to try and get down to the local lake and do more open water swimming because that is definitely a lot harder than swimming in the pool. In all the events I did, I was one of the last people coming out of the water. If I can get myself to being a mid-pack swimmer, I would be very happy with it. For the bike portion, I definitely need to work on my aero position. Even when I'm in the aero bars, I am not particularly low. Also, my position is only comfortable for like an hour. Once it gets longer than that, I start to feel pain in my arms and my back, so it's definitely not ideal. I spent quite a lot of time in the hoods and in the drops just because I didn't feel like I could sustain the aero position any longer. There's definitely huge potential for gain here. I just need to put in the time into perfecting my fit and getting used to it. Also on the bike, I feel like when it gets over 90 minutes to 2 hours, I definitely sort of hit some sort of wall. I really need to build more off an endurance base, but that is just something that will happen with time. To be honest, my strengths on the bike are definitely the shorter, more punchy efforts. There's also the question of my bike itself. It's definitely not the perfect machine for doing triathlons on. It's an endurance road bike, so the geometry is pretty high at the front, so it's more designed for comfort rather than going fast. Obviously, I'm not gonna go out and buy a £5,000 triathlon bike. It's not just the price that puts me off, it's also the fact that if I were to get a bike like that, I don't think I'd really be able to take advantage of it, especially at my current weight, and I'm also pretty inflexible. So perhaps if I can work on that, maybe if I can get down to like 85 kilograms and also work on my flexibility such that I can take advantage and actually get into a really aero position. However, in the future, if I sort those two issues out, maybe I'll treat myself to something nice. It could be like a reward for getting myself into a much healthier state. As for the run, I don't think there's anything really specific that I can improve on the run. I think because the run is the last event, it's always going to be affected by how fresh you are coming off the bike. So basically, if I get better at swimming and biking, hopefully I'll be fresh come the run and I'll actually be able to go faster. Obviously, the weight again makes a big difference. Running at over 100 kilograms is quite ridiculous. If I could get down to 85 kilograms, that would be a huge game changer. Imagine going to the gym and picking up one of those 20 kilogram plates and running with those. That's currently what I'm doing, so yeah, it's not ideal. All right, so what's next? I'm definitely going to sign up to some more triathlons, definitely going to do another half Ironman. I'm not exactly sure when yet, perhaps early next year. I'm not in any rush to do one because my main thing at the moment is the weight. When you're training for an event, obviously the training load is quite high, so you can't really focus on losing weight. So what I want to do now is put 100% of my focus on losing the weight instead. Currently, like I said, I'm over 100 kilograms. If I could get down to 90 at least, or even like 85, I would be super, super happy. So next up is a chat with my coach. I need to see what he thinks and see if we can come up with a plan together about the best way to go about this. Alright, almost at the end of the video, just a bit of admin before the end. Previously, the channel was named J Mower Cycling, which made sense because 90% of the content on the channel was cycling related. However, moving forward, I would like to branch out a bit. I feel like naming the channel about cycling sort of limits who watches it. So moving forward, the channel is now going to be called J Mower Fitness, because I hope to do more general fitness videos. So with my weight loss thing, I'm gonna be going to the gym. So maybe I'll get some gym content out as well, which would be quite cool. Also with the weight loss thing, I'm gonna probably be dieting quite a lot, so I might do some videos about that. Obviously, there's still gonna be quite a lot of cycling content as well, so don't worry if that's what you're here for, it will definitely still be coming. Overall, I feel like the name change will help bring a bit more variety to the channel, which is always a good thing. So that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you everyone who watches. Thank you all for all your support. It really means a lot to me, and yeah, that's it. Remember to like the video if you enjoyed it and to hit the subscribe button. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.